The digital noose was tightening, and he had no idea he was the one about to be hanged. It began not with a bang, but with a whisper in the code, a ghost in the machine that only one man seemed to hear. His name was Matty, a 24-year-old cybersecurity analyst with a restless mind and a moral compass that pointed unerringly true. To his colleagues at the small tech firm, he was the quiet genius in the corner office, the one who saw patterns in chaos, who could trace a digital footprint across the globe with unnerving precision. He had a fiancée, Clara, whose laugh could brighten his most stressful days, and a future that felt as limitless as the internet itself. But Matty had stumbled into a dark forest, and in the shadows, something was watching him back. It started with anomalies. Financial transactions routed through servers that shouldn't exist. Phantom data packets flitting through the firewalls of major corporations. He called them echoes, and he began to document them obsessively, a private project he dubbed the Atlas Conspiracy, named for the mysterious encrypted entity he believed was at its center. He'd stay up late, the blue glow of his monitors reflecting in his glasses, telling Clara, "It's huge. It's like a digital hydra. Cut one head, two more grow back." She'd just smile and kiss his forehead, a silent plea for him to come back to their world, the one of wedding plans and weekend hikes. The investigation into Matty's disappearance began on a Tuesday, with a phone call from a worried Clara to a skeptical Detective Miller. Miller was a man built for tangible clues, a fingerprint, a dropped wallet, a witness who saw something. The world of bits and bytes was a foreign country to him. "Ms. Dawson, adults, especially young men in high-stress jobs, take off sometimes. They need a break," he'd said, his voice a low rumble of practiced patience. But Clara was adamant. "He wouldn't, not without telling me, and his computer is gone. His work computer, that was his life." The apartment yielded nothing. No sign of a struggle, no forced entry. It was as if Matty had simply evaporated into the ether. Miller's team went through the motions, but the case was growing cold, a thin file in a drawer of more pressing, more visceral tragedies. It was Clara, armed with a determination born of love and fear, who kept the embers alive. She spent nights on Matty's personal laptop, tracing his digital breadcrumbs, until she found it, a hidden partition, password-protected, containing a single, heavily encrypted file labeled Atlas Last Resort. It was Matty's insurance policy. Decrypting it was a Herculean task, but Clara, a journalist by trade, used every resource she had. What emerged was not a smoking gun, but a map to an armory. It was a digital diary, a manifesto of fear and discovery. Matty's writings detailed a sprawling cybercrime syndicate that was more parasite than predator. Atlas didn't just steal, it infiltrated. It embedded itself in the financial, energy, and even government sectors, siphoning data and funds on an industrial scale. He named his prime suspect a man so powerful, so impeccably credentialed, that the notion seemed ludicrous. Dr. Alistair Finch was a celebrated tech visionary, a philanthropist who donated millions to cybersecurity initiatives, a man frequently quoted in Forbes and seen on CNBC. He was the last person anyone would suspect of running a global criminal enterprise from his glass-walled penthouse office. Miller, presented with this, was deeply skeptical. "This is conspiracy theory stuff, Ms. Dawson. A ghost story your fiancé got lost in." But Clara's eyes held a fire that couldn't be ignored. "It's not a ghost story, Detective. It's a confession. And Matty found it." The key evidence that broke the case open wasn't a T, found in a server farm or a dark web forum. It was found in the trash. Following a tenuous lead from Matty's files about a shell company, Miller's team, now working with a reluctant FBI cyber unit, initiated a routine financial audit. The paper trail was a masterpiece of obfuscation, a Russian doll of holding companies spanning half a dozen countries. But during a surveillance detail on a low-level money mover linked to one of these shells, an agent saw him discard a fast food bag. Inside, nestled amongst greasy wrappers, was a SIM card. It was a careless, human mistake in an otherwise impeccably digital crime. The data on that SIM was a skeleton key. It contained encrypted communication logs and, more importantly, a series of location pings that placed the user in the immediate vicinity of Matty's apartment on the night he vanished. The user's handle, pulled from the metadata, was Janus. The investigation now had its first tangible thread, and it led directly back to a security contractor whose firm was, on paper, wholly owned by a foundation chaired by Dr. Alistair Finch. The stakes had just exploded from a missing person U.S. case to a potential domestic terrorism and racketeering investigation. The pressure from above was immense, a mixture of excitement and terror. They were no longer hunting a ghost, they were aiming for a giant. The courtroom drama that followed was less a trial and more a technological exorcism. The prosecution's case was built on a mountain of digital evidence: the Atlas files, the SIM card data, financial records that showed millions flowing from the shell companies into accounts controlled by Finch A.S. Inner Circle. The defense was elegant and brutal in its simplicity: character assassination. They painted Matty as an unstable, paranoid hacker who had likely fled after embezzling funds himself. They presented Alistair Finch as a titan of industry, a genius whose complex financial structures were merely the tools of modern global business, and a man who was being framed by a disgruntled, vanished employee. Finch himself was a chillingly perfect witness. Calm, articulate, and dripping with condescending charm, he explained away every anomaly, every digital footprint. He looked the jury in the eye and said, "I build fortresses to keep people like Matthew out." It seems he found a way in, and the weight of what he saw, real or imagined, was too much for him to bear. For weeks it was a battle of experts, a war fought with fiber optic cables and firewall logs that left the jury glassy-eyed and confused. The case was slipping away, dissolving into a mist of reasonable doubt. Clara sat in the front row every day, her hands clenched, watching the man she believed had destroyed her future calmly dismantle the case against him. The climax of the trial came from a place no one expected. The prosecution, in a last-ditch effort, called a surprise witness, a former systems architect for Finch named Leo. He was a nervous man, his hands trembling as he was sworn in. He testified that he had built the core architecture for what would become Atlas, believing it to be a revolutionary data analytics platform. But when he discovered its true purpose, he tried to quit. He described a meeting with Finch, who was not angry, but coldly menacing. Leo, voice barely a whisper, said, "He told me that leaving wasn't an option. He said, I knew too much. He said, we don't fire people, Leo. We retire them. Permanently." The defense objected, screaming about hearsay, but the damage was done. The narrative of the benevolent tech leader was cracked. Then the prosecutor played a recording. It was a voicemail, extracted from a backup of Matty's phone that Clara had provided, a file so corrupted the techs had almost given up on it. The audio was scratchy, distant, as if recorded in a pocket. But the voice was unmistakably Finch's, calm and venomous. "You should have stopped looking, Matthew. Curiosity is a luxury you can no longer afford." A beat of silence, then the sound of a struggle, and Matty's voice, clear and terrified, one last desperate act of digital preservation. "His watch. It's a Patek Philippe. The serial number. It's—" The message cut to static. In the stunned silence of the courtroom, all eyes turned to Alistair Finch's wrist. He was, as he always was, wearing his signature Patek Philippe watch. The jury saw it. The world saw it. The facade of the untouchable genius shattered in that instant, replaced by the cold, hard reality of a killer caught by his own vanity. The gavel fell. The verdict was read, but the real closure was that single, haunting recording, a voice from the grave, delivering the final piece of the puzzle. Some monsters don't live under your bed. They live in the cloud, and they are listening. If stories like this keep you hooked, hit subscribe for more.